Damien Cross stood alone on the balcony of the Meridian Tower, 30 floors above the glittering city. The charity gala behind him buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the false warmth of people who measured worth in zeros. He held a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched, watching the ice melt slowly, methodically. 3 years. 3 years since he'd felt anything real. Not joy, not pain, not even curiosity. His billion-dollar empire ran like clockwork, his days scheduled down to the minute, his life a perfect machine of productivity and emptiness. You know, standing alone at your own fundraiser sends a terrible message, a voice said from behind him. It wasn't flirtatious or seeking favor. It was direct, almost challenging. Damien turned slowly, prepared to deliver his usual polite dismissal. But the words died on his lips. The woman standing there wore a simple emerald dress that somehow outshone every designer gown inside. Her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her eyes, sharp, intelligent, alive, studied him with the kind of attention that made him feel exposed. "I prefer observation to participation," Damien replied, his voice even, controlled. She laughed, and the sound was genuine, not the practiced tinkle of socialites seeking his attention. "That's the saddest thing I've heard all night, and I just listened to a woman complain about her yacht's Wi-Fi." She stepped closer, uninvited but not unwelcome. "I'm Sienna Hayes. I design buildings that don't make people want to jump out of them. The architect of feeling." Damien found himself almost smiling. "Almost." "Damien Cross, though you probably know that already," Sienna shrugged, leaning against the railing beside him. "I know you bought 3 of my firm's proposals and shelved them because they weren't profitable enough, so yes, I know who you are." There was no malice in her words, just fact. Damien should have been irritated, but instead, he felt something else. Something small and forgotten, like an ember buried under ash. "Business is business," he said. "And life is life," Sienna countered, turning to face him fully. "But you seem to have forgotten the difference." Her eyes searched his face, and Damien had the uncomfortable sensation that she could see through every carefully constructed wall he'd built. 3 years ago, I lost someone important," he found himself saying, surprising himself with the admission. "Since then, everything has felt like watching life through bulletproof glass. Safe. Distant. Numb." Sienna didn't offer the usual platitudes. Instead, she asked, "And you're comfortable with that?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Damien opened his mouth to say yes, to defend his carefully controlled existence. But under her steady gaze, he found he couldn't lie. "No," he admitted quietly. "But I don't know how to feel anymore." The challenge. Sienna studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "Then let me show you," she said. "Not tonight, not here with all these vultures circling. But give me one day. Let me take you somewhere real, somewhere without your assistants and schedules and billion-dollar deals. If you still feel nothing by the end of it, I'll design whatever soulless skyscraper you want, for free." Damien should have refused. His calendar was booked for the next 6 months. He had board meetings, investment calls, acquisitions to finalize. But looking at this woman with fire in her eyes and life radiating from her like heat, he felt that ember glow a little brighter. "And if I do feel something?" he asked. Sienna's smile was slow, dangerous, beautiful. "Then maybe you'll remember what it means to be alive." He shouldn't have agreed. Every logical part of his brain screamed that this was a waste of time, a distraction, a risk he didn't need to take. But beneath the logic, beneath the ice, something whispered yes. "Saturday," he heard himself say. "I'll clear my schedule." Surprise flickered across Sienna's face, followed by something that looked like triumph. "Don't bring your phone, your wallet, or your armor," she instructed. "Just yourself, whoever that is under all the frost." The crack in the ice. They stood there as the night deepened, the city lights spreading below them like fallen stars. Sienna told him about her work, about designing spaces that made people feel safe, inspired, connected. She spoke with passion that Damien had forgotten existed in the world. Buildings aren't just structures, she explained, her hands moving as she talked, animated and alive. They're containers for human experience. Every room should tell you something, make you feel something. Otherwise, what's the point? Damien listened, really listened, in a way he hadn't in years. I have 17 buildings across 5 continents, he said slowly. I couldn't tell you what any of them feel like. I only know their square footage and rental yields. Sienna turned to him, and her expression softened from challenge to something gentler. That's heartbreaking, she said simply. Not judgmental, just honest. You've built an empire on empty spaces. The words should have stung, but instead, they felt like truth. Damien looked at his whiskey glass, the ice now completely melted, the drink diluted and forgotten. I used to care, he admitted. Before. I used to walk through construction sites and imagine the lives that would happen there. The first kisses in hallways, the late-night conversations in lobbies, the morning coffee routines in kitchen windows. Then one day, it all just stopped mattering. The invitation. Sienna reached out and took the glass from his hand, setting it aside. The brief contact of her fingers against his sent an unexpected jolt through him, not desire exactly, but awareness. Proof that his nerves still worked, that sensation was still possible. It matters, Sienna said firmly. You just buried it so deep you forgot where to find it. But I can see it, Damien. Underneath all that ice, there's still a fire. Small, maybe almost out, but not dead. Not yet. No one had talked to him like this in years. His board feared him, his employees respected him, his dates tolerated him. But Sienna challenged him, saw through him, refused to let him hide behind his billions and his carefully controlled image. Saturday, 10 a.m., she said, pulling a card from her clutch and handing it to him. There's an address on the back. Bring yourself, and leave everything else behind. Deal? Damien took the card, their fingers touching again, that same spark of awareness. Deal, he agreed. Sienna smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and lit up her entire face. Good. Because I have a feeling you're worth saving, Damien Cross. Even if you don't believe it yourself, she turned to leave, then paused. And for what it's worth, the ice is already cracking. I can see it in your eyes. The sleepless night. After she left, Damien stayed on the balcony long after the gala ended. Vincent, his assistant, found him there an hour later. Sir, your car is waiting, Vincent said carefully. And you have an early meeting tomorrow. Damien looked at the card in his hand, Sienna's handwriting bold and confident on the back. An address in the countryside, nowhere near his usual world of glass towers and marble lobbies. Vincent, clear my schedule for Saturday, Damien said. His assistant blinked in surprise. Sir, you have the investors, cancel it. Move it. I don't care. Saturday is blocked. Vincent had worked for Damien for 8 years and had never heard him cancel a business meeting for personal reasons. Of course, sir. May I ask what for? Damien smiled then, just slightly, the first genuine smile in 3 years. I'm going to see if I can remember how to feel. That night, alone in his penthouse that resembled a luxury hotel more than a home, Damien lay awake. He thought about Sienna's words, about empty spaces and buried fires. He thought about the last 3 years, moving through life like a ghost in an expensive suit. And for the first time since everything went numb, he felt something. Anticipation. Nervousness. Hope. They were small, fragile feelings, like the first shoots of green after a long winter. But they were there. Proof that underneath the ice, something still lived. As dawn broke over the city, painting his floor-to-ceiling windows gold, Damien made a decision. Saturday, he would let Sienna show him whatever she wanted. He would leave behind his phone, his defenses, his carefully controlled world. And maybe, just maybe, he would find out if the man he used to be was still somewhere inside the billionaire he'd become. The thought terrified him. But beneath the terror, that small ember glowed brighter. He was afraid. And fear, he realized, was a feeling too. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and crisp air. Damien stood outside the address Sienna had given him, feeling absurdly underdressed in jeans and a simple shirt. No tie, no suit jacket, no armor. His phone sat on his penthouse counter, abandoned as instructed. He felt naked without it. The building before him was nothing special, a converted warehouse in the industrial district, raw brick and large windows. A hand-painted sign read, "Hayes and Collective Architecture." Sienna emerged before he could knock, wearing paint-stained overalls and a smile that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. "You actually came," she said, genuine surprise in her voice. "And you followed the rules." "No phone, I hope," Damien held up his empty hands. "As ordered. Though I should warn you, my assistant has probably filed a missing person report by now." Sienna laughed, that same genuine sound from the gala, and gestured him inside. "Welcome to where the magic happens. Or at least where I try to convince people that buildings should have souls." The studio was chaos and beauty combined. Architectural models covered every surface, blueprints pinned to walls, coffee cups forming rings on drafting tables. But there was life here, energy, passion in every corner. "The conversation begins." "Coffee?" Sienna offered, already pouring from a battered pot. "It's terrible, but it's honest." Damien accepted the chipped mug, noting how different it felt from his usual pristine porcelain. "You brought me here to show me your office?" he asked, not unkindly. Sienna shook her head, hopping up to sit on her desk, legs swinging. "I brought you here to talk first. You can't remember how to feel because you've forgotten how to be honest. So let's start there. Tell me about 3 years ago. What happened?" The question was direct, invasive, exactly the kind of personal inquiry Damien had spent 3 years avoiding. He should have shut it down, left, returned to his safe, numb existence. But he'd made a promise, and something about this woman with paint on her hands and truth in her eyes made him want to try. "Her name was Jessica," he began, the words rough, unused. "We were engaged. She died in a car accident on the way to a meeting I insisted she take. One moment she was here, the next she wasn't. And I realized that all my money, all my power, couldn't stop it, couldn't fix it, couldn't bring her back." Sienna listened without interruption, her expression serious, respectful. "So you decided if you couldn't control life, you'd stop living it," she said softly. Damien nodded. "When she died, it felt like someone reached inside my chest and switched off a light. At first, the pain was unbearable. So I worked. 18-hour days, 20-hour days. I bought companies, built towers, made billions. And somewhere in all that work, I stopped feeling anything at all. Which was exactly what I wanted. The architect's story." "And now?" Sienna asked. "Is it still what you want?" Damien looked at his coffee, the steam rising in lazy spirals. "I don't know anymore. 3 days ago, I would have said yes. That numbness was safety, protection. But then you showed up on that balcony and called my life sad, and something shifted." Sienna smiled sadly. "I know what it's like to shut down," she admitted. 3 years ago, same as you, funny coincidence, I was in a different kind of accident. A fire in my apartment building. I made it out, but my neighbor, an elderly woman named Grace who used to bring me soup when I worked late, didn't." Damien looked up, seeing Sienna differently now. "I'm sorry," she shrugged, but he could see the old pain in her eyes. "I stopped designing for 6 months. Couldn't imagine creating spaces for people to live in when Grace would never live anywhere again. But then her daughter found me, said Grace always talked about my beautiful buildings full of light. She asked me to design Grace's memorial in the community garden. And I realized something. The philosophy of feeling. Sienna jumped down from the desk, moving to a window that overlooked the city. Shutting down doesn't honor the people we lost. Living fully does. Grace loved life, terrible jokes, burned cooking, singing off-key in the hallway. She would have hated me giving up. So I came back, but different. Now I design spaces that make people feel alive, because that's the best memorial I can build. Damien stood beside her, seeing the city through different eyes. But what if feeling means hurting again? He asked quietly. Sienna turned to face him. It will. That's the deal. You can't choose to feel only the good stuff. Pain, joy, fear, love, they're all part of the package. But Damien, existing without feeling isn't living. It's just waiting to die. The words hit him like cold water, shocking and clarifying. I've been waiting to die, he said, the realization crystallizing. For 3 years, I've been a ghost in an expensive suit. Sienna nodded. But you don't have to be. That's why I challenged you. I saw someone still fighting underneath all that ice, even if you didn't know it. The first crack. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of honesty between them. Then Sienna smiled, the mood shifting. Okay, enough heavy philosophy. Time for the practical lesson. We're going to do something you haven't done in 3 years. Damien raised an eyebrow. Which is? Sienna grabbed her jacket. Something spontaneous, unscheduled, and completely impractical. We're going to spend a day doing things that serve absolutely no business purpose. Things that exist purely for the experience. You game? Every instinct Damien had screamed no. His mind immediately listed the meetings he should attend, the emails piling up, the opportunities he was missing. But beneath the panic, that small ember glowed warmer. Yes, he said. Sienna's face lit up. Good answer. First stop, the farmer's market. When's the last time you bought your own food? Damien thought about his chef-prepared meals, his catered lunches, his assistant-ordered dinners. I honestly can't remember. Perfect, Sienna grinned. Let's go remind you what a tomato smells like when it's actually ripe. They left the studio, stepping into the morning sunshine. Damien noticed things he usually missed, the way light hit the buildings, the sound of street musicians playing in the park, the smell of coffee from the corner shop. Small things, but each one a tiny reminder that the world had texture, sensation, life. The market. The farmer's market was chaos. Vendors called out their wares, samples thrust at passers-by, children running between stalls. Damien felt overwhelmed, his usual controlled environment replaced by beautiful disorder. Sienna navigated it like a dancer, stopping to chat with vendors she clearly knew well. Damien, try this, she said, holding out a slice of peach. He took it, the juice running over his fingers, the sweetness exploding on his tongue. It's good, he said, surprised by how simple pleasure could feel so intense. Good? It's perfection, Sienna corrected, buying a basket. This is what food tastes like when someone actually cares about growing it. They moved through the market, Sienna introducing him to people, encouraging him to touch, smell, taste. A woman selling honey offered samples, explaining the different flowers that created different flavors. A baker described the overnight rise of his sourdough with the passion of an artist. Damien found himself drawn in, asking questions, genuinely curious. You're smiling, Sienna observed as they left, arms full of bags. Damien touched his face, surprised. I am. It felt strange, the muscles unused to the expression. It feels weird, Sienna laughed. That's because you've forgotten how. But it looks good on you. Natural, even. They walked to a park, spreading out their market finds on a bench. Simple food, eaten with hands, no white tablecloths or silver utensils. Damien couldn't remember the last time a meal had tasted so good. The confession. "Can I ask you something?" Damien said as they ate. Sienna nodded. "Why did you challenge me? You don't know me." "For all you knew, I was a lost cause," Sienna considered the question. "Because I saw recognition in your eyes. That look of someone going through the motions, surviving but not living. I recognized it because I wore it for 6 months. And I thought, maybe if someone had challenged me earlier, I wouldn't have wasted half a year." Damien set down his food, looking at her seriously. "No one has touched my heart in 3 years," he said quietly. "Not touched as in romance, though that too. But touched as in reached, connected, made me feel something real. Until you walked onto that balcony 3 days ago and told me my life was sad. That was the first moment in 3 years I felt anything beyond numb." Sienna's expression softened. "And what do you feel now?" Damien thought about it, really examined the sensations in his chest. "Scared," he admitted. "Because feeling means risk. But also alive, which I'd forgotten was an option. And grateful, which is perhaps strangest of all." Sienna reached across the bench, her hand covering his. The contact sent warmth through him, not electric this time but gentle, grounding. "Being scared means you're healing," she said. "Fear is just care without armor." The kiss. They sat like that, hands touching, the city moving around them. Damien looked at Sienna, really looked at her. The paint still in her hair, the passion in her eyes, the way she approached life like an adventure rather than an obligation. "I want to kiss you," he said, surprising himself with the honesty. "But I don't know if I remember how." Sienna smiled, a little sad, a little hopeful. "It's like riding a bike. And Damien, I've been wanting you to kiss me since I saw you looking at that melted ice like it meant something." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, giving himself time to panic and retreat. But she stayed, and so did he. Their lips met, gentle at first, then deeper as memory awakened. It wasn't perfect or practiced. It was real, tentative, honest. When they pulled apart, Damien felt his eyes burning. "I'm going to cry," he said, shocked. "I haven't cried since the funeral." Sienna touched his face, her thumb brushing away the first tear. "Then cry. That's feeling too. That's being alive." So he did. Sitting on a park bench with a woman he barely knew, Damien Cross, billionaire, CEO, master of control, cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming relief of feeling something after so long. And Sienna held his hand through it all, patient, steady, present. The truth. When the tears subsided, Damien laughed, shaky but genuine. "This is the strangest first date I've ever had," Sienna grinned. "Good. Strange means memorable. And Damien, this isn't about dating. This is about remembering you're human before you're a billionaire. Everything else can come after." They spent the rest of the day wandering, an art gallery where Sienna explained why certain spaces made people pause, a bookstore where they got lost in different sections, a street performer's jazz set that made Damien close his eyes and just listen. By the time evening fell, Damien felt exhausted in a way no board meeting ever made him. Emotional exhaustion, the kind that came from actually engaging with life instead of observing it from behind glass. "Thank you," he said as they stood outside her studio again. "I don't know if I'm fixed, but I feel less broken." Sienna shook her head. "You were never broken. Just frozen. And ice melts, given the right conditions." Damien took her hand again, the contact feeling natural now. "Can I see you again? Not as a challenge or a lesson, but just because I want to." Sienna's smile was answer enough. "Yes. And Damien, one more thing." He waited. "The man I kissed today, the one who cried and laughed and tasted peaches like they mattered, that's the real you. Don't forget him when you put the suit back on Monday." 2 weeks passed like a dream Damien kept waking up from. Meetings that once consumed him now felt hollow, numbers on spreadsheets meaningless compared to the texture of Sienna's hand in his. They'd seen each other 6 times, coffee before work, dinners that stretched until midnight, a rainy afternoon in her studio where she taught him to sketch buildings with emotion instead of just precision. Each meeting chipped away more ice. But Damien could feel himself slipping back. The corporate world pulled at him with urgent emails, board pressure, the comfortable numbness of pure business. He recognized the danger, the ease of retreating into what he knew. Thursday evening, his phone rang. Sienna's name lit up the screen, and just seeing it made his chest warm. "I need to kidnap you this weekend," she said without greeting. Full 48 hours. No phones, no emails, no billion-dollar emergencies. Just you, me, and proof that you're still in there. Damien looked at his calendar, color-coded and packed. Vincent had scheduled him through Sunday evening. "Sienna, she cut him off. "A choice. You can keep existing, or you can start living. But you have to choose, Damien. I can't melt the ice for you. You have to want to thaw." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Damien thought about the last 2 weeks, the moments of clarity followed by the slide back into numbness. He thought about Jessica, about what she would have wanted for him. And he made the choice. Where and when? The lake house. Friday at noon, Damien found himself in Sienna's beat-up car, driving out of the city. She refused to tell him their destination, just smiled mysteriously and turned up the radio. They sang along to old songs, badly, joyfully, and Damien felt 17 instead of 35. 3 hours later, they pulled up to a small cabin on a lake, surrounded by pine trees and absolute quiet. "It belonged to my grandmother," Sienna explained as they unloaded. "No Wi-Fi, spotty cell service, and the nearest store is 40 minutes away. Just us, nature, and whatever conversations we've been avoiding." Damien felt panic flutter in his chest. 48 hours of nowhere to hide, no distractions, just himself and this woman who saw through every defense. "What if I can't do this?" he asked quietly. Sienna stopped unpacking, turning to face him. "Then we'll figure it out together." "But Damien, you've spent 3 years running from yourself. 2 days of standing still won't kill you. It might actually save you." She was right. He knew she was right. So he picked up his bag and followed her inside, into the unknown. The first evening. They spent the afternoon settling in, a domesticity Damien hadn't experienced in years. Sienna cooked while he chopped vegetables, their shoulders brushing in the small kitchen. They played cards on the porch as the sun set, painting the lake gold and pink. Simple activities that should have been boring but instead felt precious, weighted with meaning. "Tell me about Jessica," Sienna said as darkness fell. They sat by a fire pit, the flames casting dancing shadows. "Not the tragedy, but the person. What did you love about her?" Damien stared into the fire, the question stirring memories he'd locked away. "She laughed at terrible jokes," he began slowly. "Mine especially. She'd wake up early just to watch the sunrise, said it was proof that every day was a new chance. She believed in me before I'd built anything, when I was just a kid with ideas and ambition." Sienna listened, her presence patient, giving him space to remember. "She sounds wonderful," Damien nodded. "She was. And when she died, it felt like the world lost its color. Everything went gray. So I stopped looking at it, stopped engaging with it. Because if I didn't feel anything, it couldn't hurt anymore." He paused, throat tight. "But you know what? I think she'd hate what I became. Jessica lived so fully, loved so fiercely. She'd be furious that I let her death make me stop living." The midnight conversation. They talked until past midnight, the fire burning low. Sienna shared her own fears, that she'd never create something truly meaningful, that she'd let grace down, that opening herself to feeling meant eventually feeling loss again. But here's what I learned, she said, wrapping a blanket around both of them against the chill. Grief is love with nowhere to go. You don't stop loving someone because they're gone. You just have to find new ways to carry it. Damien felt tears coming again, but this time he didn't fight them. I thought forgetting was the only way to survive. Sienna took his hand. No, remembering is how you survive. But remembering with love, not with pain. Jessica was part of your story, a beautiful part. But she's not the ending. You get to keep writing chapters. They sat in silence, the lake lapping gently at the shore, the stars endless above them. Damien felt something shift inside, like ice breaking up in spring. Sienna, I need to tell you something. She waited. No one has touched my heart in 3 years, he said, echoing his earlier confession. But you did. You reached through all the walls and armor and numbness, and you touched something I thought was dead. And it's terrifying because now I have something to lose again. The sunrise. Sienna turned to face him fully, the firelight catching in her eyes. Damien, loss is the price of love. Pain is the price of joy. There's no way to feel the good without risking the bad. But the alternative, existing without feeling, that's not safety. That's just slow death. She was right. He'd known it intellectually for weeks, but now he felt it, the truth settling into his bones. I don't want to go back, he said quietly. To the numbness, the control, the empty buildings and meaningless numbers. But I don't know how to stay present, how to keep feeling when it's so much easier to shut down. Sienna kissed his forehead gently. One day at a time. One feeling at a time. And you don't have to do it alone. That's the other thing you forgot, connection. You can't heal in isolation. They moved inside eventually, the cabin cozy and warm. Sienna fell asleep on the couch, her head on Damien's shoulder. He stayed awake, listening to her breathe, feeling the weight of her trust in him. For the first time in 3 years, he felt present, grounded, real. Not thinking about tomorrow's meetings or yesterday's losses, just existing in this moment. Alive. The morning after. Damien woke to sunlight streaming through windows and the smell of coffee. Sienna stood by the stove, making breakfast, humming to herself. Watching her, Damien felt his chest expand with something he'd forgotten, contentment. Not happiness exactly, but peace. The quiet joy of simple moments. Good morning, she said, noticing him awake. Sleep okay? He had, deeply, without the usual nightmares or restless thoughts. Better than I have in years. They ate breakfast on the porch, watching the lake come alive with morning. Birds called, fish jumped, the world waking up around them. I used to love mornings, Damien admitted. Jessica and I would watch the sunrise together, plan our day, dream about the future. After she died, mornings became something to survive, just another requirement before I could bury myself in work. Sienna set down her coffee, taking his hand. And now, Damien looked at the lake, the light dancing on water, the trees swaying in a gentle breeze. He felt the warmth of the sun on his face, the taste of coffee on his tongue, the softness of Sienna's hand in his. Now, he said slowly, I think I remember why mornings matter. They're proof that life continues, that new chances exist, that yesterday doesn't have to define today. The confession. They spent the morning hiking a trail around the lake, stopping to skip stones and identify birds Sienna knew by name. Damien found himself laughing at her terrible bird impressions, his voice echoing across the water. Laughter, another feeling he'd forgotten he possessed. At the top of a small hill overlooking the lake, they stopped to rest. I've made a decision, Damien said, the words coming before he could second-guess them. Sienna waited, patient as always. I'm not going back to who I was. Not completely. The empire, the company, the billions, none of it matters if I'm dead inside. I need to find balance. Purpose beyond profit. Meaning beyond control. Sienna's smile was brilliant. What will you do? Damien thought about it, ideas forming that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. Start smaller. Invest in projects that matter, like your sustainable housing initiative. Cut my hours. Hire a co-CEO to handle the parts of the business that don't fulfill me. And most importantly, make time for things that have no business purpose: mornings, laughter, people who see me instead of just my bank account. The truth spoken. Sienna leaned against him, and they sat like that, watching the lake shimmer below. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. That takes courage, to choose feeling over safety. Damien turned to her, his heart pounding with the weight of words he needed to say. Sienna, 3 weeks ago I was a ghost. You didn't just challenge me to feel again, you showed me what's possible when you do. You touched my heart when I thought it was dead. And now I'm terrified because I'm falling for you, and that means I could lose again, and I don't know if I'm strong enough. Sienna's eyes glistened with tears. You are strong enough. You're one of the strongest people I've met. Because true strength isn't avoiding pain, it's feeling everything and choosing to keep going anyway. And Damien, I'm falling too. Have been since that first night when you admitted you didn't know how to feel anymore. Because I saw the man underneath the ice, and he was worth reaching. They kissed then, different from their first kiss in the park. This one was deeper, slower, filled with promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, Damien felt complete in a way he hadn't since before the world went gray. What happens now? He asked. When we go back to the real world, to your projects and my meetings and the 1,000 things that will try to pull us apart? The promise. Sienna stood, pulling him to his feet. We remember this. We remember what matters. We choose each other, and feeling, and living, every single day. Some days will be easier than others. Some days you'll want to retreat behind those walls, and some days I'll be too much fire for your recovering ice. But we'll figure it out, together. Damien wrapped his arms around her, holding tight to this woman who'd saved him without even meaning to. Together, he repeated. I like the sound of that. They spent the rest of the weekend in that cabin, talking and laughing and planning a future that looked nothing like Damien's controlled past. They discussed which of his properties to convert to affordable housing, which projects deserved funding, how to build a life around meaning instead of money. Sunday evening, as they packed to leave, Damien took one last look at the lake. Thank you, he said to Sienna. For challenging me. For being patient. For touching my heart when I thought it was impossible. Sienna zipped her bag, smiling. Thank you for letting me. For being brave enough to thaw. And Damien, one last thing. He waited. This isn't the end of the hard part. It's the beginning. Staying present, staying open, staying alive, that's daily work. But it's worth it. You're worth it. The return. Driving back to the city, Damien felt different. Lighter, somehow, despite carrying more emotional weight than he had in years. His phone, left behind in the cabin's kitchen drawer, would be filled with urgent messages. Vincent would have a list of emergencies. The board would be angry about his absence. But for the first time, Damien didn't care. Let them be angry. He had something more valuable than their approval. He had himself back. What are you thinking? Sienna asked, glancing over as she drove. Damien smiled, the expression coming easier now. That 3 weeks ago, I was a billionaire who'd forgotten how to be human. Now I'm a human who happens to have billions. And that's a much better thing to be. Sienna laughed, that beautiful, genuine sound. Spoken like someone who's remembered what matters. As the city skyline came into view, Damien didn't feel the usual dread. Instead, he felt ready. Ready to rebuild his empire around values instead of valuations. Ready to prioritize people over profits. Ready to live instead of just exist. Sienna, he said as they entered the city limits. 3 years ago, someone touched my heart. Then she died, and I locked that heart away, convinced safety was better than feeling. But you taught me something crucial: a heart that never risks being touched again isn't safe. It's just empty. The beginning. Sienna pulled over, turning to face him fully. And now, Damien took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth, the grounding presence. Now my heart is awake, aware, alive. Touching yours. And yes, that means I could get hurt again. But it also means I get to feel joy, connection, love. It means I get to be human. And that's worth every risk. They sat in the car as the city hummed around them, two people who'd found each other in the midst of their grief and learned to build something new from the pieces. Where to? Sienna asked, starting the engine again. Damien thought about his penthouse, empty and cold. He thought about board meetings and profit reports. Then he thought about this woman beside him, about mornings that mattered and feelings that made life worth living. Anywhere, he said. As long as we're choosing to feel it together. Sienna smiled and pulled into traffic, and Damien watched the city lights blur past, each one a tiny proof of life continuing, of moments waiting to be lived. His heart, frozen for 3 long years, beat steady and warm in his chest. Still healing, still learning, but undeniably, beautifully alive. Tomorrow he'd face the consequences of his weekend disappearance. Tomorrow he'd start restructuring his company around his new values. Tomorrow he'd begin the hard work of staying present, staying open, staying human. But tonight, he had this moment. This woman. This feeling. And for the first time in 3 years, Damien Cross knew exactly what mattered. Not the buildings he owned or the billions he controlled, but the connections he made and the life he chose to live. Fully, bravely, imperfectly alive.